Hello and welcome to this masterclass session. My name's Simon Middleton. I am Managing Director of Protek Group Limited, and we provide site insurance and structure warranties for self-build and development in the UK. This masterclass session is about protecting your risk. It's a guide to insurance warranties and loss prevention for all project types, not just new builds. It includes renovations, extensions and conversions. You're currently looking at a slide here, which is looks like a pile of timber. It was a timber frame property. It was destroyed in a windstorm in the UK, and turned out to be about a £90,000 claim in the end. The couple were insured with Protek, and the premium was about £500. And I think that's a pretty good indication as to why you need to consider risk management. Okay, let's get a feel for the sort of different projects out there and how they are impacted by insurance and warranties. So on the left here, we've got a renovation. This includes an existing structure. Maybe the renovation project was bought at auction, it's been unoccupied for a little while. In this situation, you're going to need to insure the existing structure, i.e. the house that's there now. You might need to consider a party wall agreement, and you're going to have to cover all the new works that are going on at the same time. In terms of a new build, that's a lot easier. It's just the new work structure that we're looking to insure here. We might incorporate a structural warranty as well. And then if we go on to an extension, again, there's an existing structural element. It could be your home, and we're going to be extending it. We might be going up, we might be going around to the side. All those elements would be covered under a site insurance policy. And then here we've got a conversion, a barn conversion. Again, there's an existing structure. Maybe it's in a really poor state of repair. Maybe it's just really materials that are being removed before being rebuilt. But again, site insurance covers the existing structure and the new works. Now, the important thing to bear in mind here is that none of these projects are going to be covered by home insurance. You might think the renovations are home, you might think your extensions are home, and clearly the home does incorporate a part of it, but home insurance doesn't afford you the cover that you really need on one of these projects. We understand that all these projects are going to be unique to you. You'll be doing things differently. So it's really important that you speak to an expert that really understands that. An insurance provider within a building society, for example, or perhaps a broker that doesn't deal with this stuff day in, day out, really wouldn't know how to best give you the cover you need. Although you're only looking at new works as having a building site, all of these are going to be covered by site insurance. So what would happen if you didn't have any insurance? These are photographs of claims that we've had in, and I'm just trying to give you an overview of the sort of how the risk can extrapolate pretty quickly. So on the left here, you've got a building which, again, is storm damaged. It's quite prevalent in terms of claims. The gables have been blown down in the storm. The gables, all the blockwork has fallen. It's gone crashing through the beams of the beam and block floor and destroyed that. And you think that's bad enough. But what you can't see in this photograph is alongside where the beams were bearing onto the internal structure, they have all sheared and actually moved the entire internal structure upwards. So it's structurally now insecure. So this building had to be taken back down again to the debt-proof course level and then reconstructed. Now, if you don't have a contingency fund big enough to cover that, then you need to start considering some insurance policies. Unfortunately, construction sites are fairly dangerous places, and contractors working on your site can injure themselves, sometimes quite severely. But even something like stepping off a ladder onto a loose brick can end up in a couple of broken ankles. And typically, in terms of public liability, that ends up being a £15,000 claim. Now, any sort of loss in that situation is going to involve a lot of your time. It's not just the financial aspect of it or the fact that somebody's been severely hurt. This is a staged photograph, but it's trying to drive home to you that you do have responsibility for health and safety on your site if you're exercising any form of control. So you need to consider these things quite carefully. We'll talk a little bit more about health and safety down the line. Now here we've got more storm damage. We've got a tree that's partially come down. It's damaged the scaffolding. It's caused damage to the roof. At the end of the day, this is a fairly minimal claim. The costs involved in terms of getting a tree surgeon out to make the tree safe, repairing the scaffold, it's not going to be horrendous. However, if you're hiring the scaffold, that's going to be your responsibility. So that's why site insurance in this situation has been really useful. On the right hand side here, you can see, hopefully you can see, just in this area here and here, thieves have tried to break into the ground floor windows. Now this particular house, this claim, they actually tried all the ground floor windows. And the reason they were trying to break in is because on the other side of the windows were some empty cardboard boxes. Now, of course, the thieves don't know they're empty. Too tempting, so they absolutely went for it. So now the repair bill is for all the rendering and all the windows. Covered by site insurance, but the delay in terms of getting the windows to site is going to be fairly horrific at the end of the day. So that's worth considering. In a serious claim, an insurer is going to have to rebuild your entire property. Now, you're used to working with your build cost, but what you need to bear in mind is you should be insuring for professional reinstatement values. Build costs might involve a lot of your time in terms of managing the project. And if 2 days before you moved in, it was destroyed by fire, you may not have the ability to manage that project all over again. If you insure for professional reinstatement cost, then the insurer will be able to rebuild it using a main contractor as quickly as possible, and we always recommend this. So what do you actually need to cover during the course of doing your project? Well, in this slide you can see we've got new build, conversion, renovation here, and extension, and they're all covered by site insurance. Site insurance covers the new works, temporary works, materials, plant, tools, and equipment, whether you've hired them in or you own them. If you're living on site, it will cover the caravan, the contents of the caravan. If you are living on site, then you haven't got any contents cover for a house, so your personal possessions would be covered as well. Public liability, which covers things like damage to neighbouring property or injury to a third party, and employer's liability, which is injury to one of your employees. Now, you might think I'm not employing anyone. Sometimes that's actually a little bit grey when it comes to working on sites, so you get it whether you like it or not. But it also covers people working for you on a voluntary basis or indeed your friends. Now, a new build, that's pretty straightforward. Conversion, renovation, and extension, the only difference here is the existing structure. A conversion project involves an existing structure, the renovation project involves an existing structure, and so does an extension. The last two, it's normally your home. But home insurance only covers fire, lightning, aircraft explosion, malicious damage, and vandalism. What it doesn't cover is somebody putting a new opening into a wall and your building collapsing. That's why site insurance is so important on a renovation, extension, and a conversion project. You need to arrange insurance from early doors, from the time you exchange contracts on the plot or you've purchased the property. If somebody wanders onto your site, irrespective of the fact they may be trespassing and injures themselves, it will be your liability. You need to insure for professional reinstatement cost. This is important. If the property is destroyed completely, the insurer will need to rebuild it. If you are underinsured, the insurer will reduce the amount of money they pay for the claim by the amount that you're underinsured. So that is really, really important. In terms of plant, tools, and equipment, you may think, well, I'm not hiring anything my contractor's hiring. That's absolutely fine. Just make sure that you don't sign any of the hire agreements when the stuff is delivered to your site. So these site insurance policies come in 3-month durations. So you might think, well, I'm going to have my house built in 9 months. If you run over, a 3-month extension is going to be more expensive than buying a 12-month policy from the outset. So try to be realistic when you're actually considering the length of time that you want to take the policy out for. You might need to consider some legal expenses. Now, legal expenses when it comes to a self-build cover contractual disputes. In order to have a contractual dispute, you've got to have a written contract in the first place. There is absolutely no point ringing up a legal expenses helpline saying, I've got a problem with one of my contractors if you haven't got a contract evidenced in writing. So we suggest you use contracts to do your project. You can get them from a place called contractstore.com. They are not very expensive, and you can contract all the trades and all the major suppliers for your project. It's the glue that sticks it all together. If you're not using contracts, then do not buy legal expenses because it will be a complete waste of money for you. Underpinning, basements, loft conversions, building close to a neighboring property. It doesn't have to be just a wall. It can be a fence line, for example. It could be a retaining wall. All have this instance of party wall liability, so you do need to consider it very hard. Now, I've touched on structural warranty. So why would you need one? Well, in these pictures, we've just identified some of the issues that come up on a regular basis when we are auditing a structural warranty policy. So you can see here on the left, we've got a spirit level. You can see it's not particularly level at that point, just there. This is on a SIP panel system. If the SIPs are not going up correctly in a plumb situation, it causes structural problems down the line. This was picked up under survey. Up here, we've got an opening in a roof for a Velux window or something similar. It's not been double trimmed. That's going to be a structural problem in the roof. Down here, we've got a steel column, which is it's missed its padstone completely, and now the padstone has actually physically started to fail. This one here, we've got a damp-proof membrane that's not being correctly lapped. This is a bit of a disaster. This is going to allow damp into the property. This picture is very difficult to see in this one here, but it's a barn conversion, new opening. That's the lintel there. And the bearing is not sufficient, so it's actually started to crack on the existing structure here, and that's going to fail. Obviously, if the lintel fails, then the wall above it's going to come down, which is not going to be great. And then here we've got a steel column poking through a SIP system. That will cause a cold bridge, damped moisture. Moisture and timber don't work very well, so you can see where that would go. And this here, we've got what's called partial fill insulation being used in a full fill cavity situation. That will lead to damp as well. So the point here is a structural warranty would help you, because we're inspecting, identify these things. So if you do not know what good construction, bad construction, or the right product looks like, then a structural warranty is really important, because without one, they will become your issues. Here we have another problem on site. Foundation excavations have been dug. The ground is not very good. They've dug too deep, so they've now backfilled with mud they've taken out. They've tramped it down. It's not sufficient bearing. When the concrete's on there, the concrete will sink. It might not settle correctly, and it will crack. In this situation, we've got a service pipe that's going along the foundation trench. They've put a bit of mesh over it to hope for the best. There's no spaces. It's a bit of a disaster. That will cause a fracture point in the foundation. Again, if you didn't know what you were looking for, would you pick it up on site? So what we've got here is an inspection report that's issued to you after an inspection has been carried out. Behind this is a sheet of photographs that are referenced to any of the defects that I've identified on site, and movement joints, drips, weep holes, risk of water ingress causing damage, client to advise his intention. It's been resolved because it's been inspected at the next point. Foundation brickwork cavity exposed to thrust. All these points are the surveyor checking what's going on site and just ensuring that it's all being dealt with during the course of construction, or you've sent in some photographs that prove that the defect has been remedied along the way, and that will go through the entire project to the point that everything is being cleared off and it's ready to be issued in terms of a warranty with a completion certificate. You may have heard of architect certificates being accepted in terms of doing self-build projects. We suggest you don't rely on them. In order to make a claim on an architect certificate, you will have to prove professional negligence against the architect. It's very easy for an architect to turn around and say, I wasn't there the day that was built, which leaves you standing nowhere, basically. It's a long, drawn-out process, normally involving lawyers. So think twice before you go down the architect certificate route. You will need a structural warranty for a mortgage lender, either the one that's lending you to do the project in the first place, or should you sell down the line. We recommend you arrange them really early, because if you don't, the price escalates for all the bits and pieces that have not been inspected during the course of construction. And check the insurer that's behind the warranty. You need to make sure they're an A-rated insurer. That is crucially important. Okay, so this is not really everything to do with insurance, but this is stuff we think you need to know based on our experience over many years of doing this. Plant tools and equipment. Clearly, they're quite theft attractive items. If you have finished with an item of plant that's being hired to you, ring the hire company and off-hire it straight away, because it's their responsibility then, not yours. If you've got stuff delivered to site and you are not... In this slide, I'm just going to cover off stuff that you need to know. Not all of it's related to the insurance, but it's good hints as to how to minimize risk on site. So plant tools and equipment. Unfortunately, this stuff gets stolen. Kids like to play on them, and it's a bit of a nightmare. If you have finished with an item of plant and you're hiring it, for example, off-hire it, because it's not your responsibility at that point in time. Once it's off-hired, it's up to them. If you've got hired plant tools and equipment being delivered to site that you have not hired, perhaps your contractor has, don't sign the hire agreement. Let somebody who has got responsibility for it sign the hire agreement. Otherwise, the person that signed it is deemed to be the hirer, and if you haven't got the cover in place, that could be a bit of a nightmare. For fire, lightning, aircraft explosion, malicious damage and vandalism. Not for theft of your materials, not for I've just created a new opening and my house has collapsed, not for I've got water pouring through because something's not gone particularly right. Home insurance is fine for your home, but it doesn't actually cover an extension project very effectively. CDM, health and safety, if you're managing or part managing the risk on site, then you will have a responsibility for health and safety. If you go to the HSE website, there are some really simple guides as to how to assess risk and how to manage the health and safety on your site. You don't want workers on the ground floor while your bricklayers are still laying bricks on the first floor. That's a recipe for disaster, and that's simple risk management. What to do if you suffer a loss, this one in the middle? Well, you need to act as if you're uninsured. So if you've got flooding, for example, get a pump in. If you need to get tarpaulins in, if you've got to make the structure safe as a matter of emergency, take the tree instant that you saw, must get somebody in to make the tree safe. If you keep the receipts and photographic evidence of everything that's occurred, that will all be recoverable as part and parcel of your claim. Friends helping you on site. If they are helping you on site, you've got employer's liability under a Protek warranty, Protek site insurance policy anyway. And they will be covered against injury on your site. Indemnity. This is an insurance term. Site insurance policies are based on indemnity. They are not new for old. So if you have a 6-year-old JCB on site and it is stolen, it will be replaced with a 6-year-old JCB. But you will need to evidence when you bought it and how much you paid for it to enable the insurer to settle it on an indemnity basis. So the advice here is keep receipts for absolutely everything. Contracts, use them. They are the glue that seals the whole thing together. They are really, really important. You can get a contract pack from Contract Store for about £60. It's not particularly expensive, very easy to follow, and can save you a lot of grief down the line. This last one in the corner, my contractor has insurance. Most contractors will say they're fully insured. What does fully insured actually mean, and are they insurance experts? No, they're not. They haven't got a clue what it really means. 9 times out of 10, your contractor has got public liability cover, and that's about as much use to you as a chocolate teapot. If your contractor is building the whole house for you from start to finish and giving you the keys at the end, and there is a contract between you, and they have a contractor's all risks insurance policy with a limit on it which is big enough to cover the rebuild cost of your house, then you can rely on your contractor's insurance. But you need to make sure it doesn't lapse during the course of construction, and if it does, you need to see the renewal documentation. If they haven't, or you're taking over the project at any point during the course of that construction project, you will need some site insurance. If you arrange the warranty yourself, if you fall out of love with your contractor, then you are still in charge of your own destiny in terms of the warranty. Otherwise, they can hold that against you. So that's really important. Okay, well, that's the end of the masterclass session. I hope it's been useful for you. We will be on chat on stand. If you've got any questions, you can get us there. Afterwards, you can get me on Twitter. You can see the Twitter address just over here, Middleton Simon, capital M, capital S. Hope that was useful for you, and good luck with your projects.